We are the music makers, and we are the dreamers of dreams.
Hey everybody, welcome to Meanwhile Back at the Lab with Paximus. I hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you may be, whether it's the morning, afternoon, or evening. I'm very glad that you're here with us today. Thank you guys so much for being here. I think this is going to be awesome. It's going to be a lot of fun getting into this discussion here with our special guest, Crashhermit. I think a lot of people are looking forward to this. I know I am. And I'm really excited because I've been wanting to talk with Crash for a while and just kind of get to know him and, you know, the study methods that he uses, how he got to YouTube, all things like that. We'll get into it in just a little bit. But just quickly, I want to say hello to the chat. QNVK, thank you so much for being here. Of course, Crashhermit, thank you so much for being here. Sarah Oxford, thank you so much for being here. Another live streamer, Laura Byrne, is in the house, so it's really good to see her here. Lerzan, thank you so much for being here as well. Savannah, it's good to see you, Savannah. Thank you so much for being here. Artsy B, who's another mod here. Thank you so much, guys, for being here and for supporting. And I really hope you enjoy this live stream. If you haven't done so already, please go ahead and give this live stream a thumbs up. And I would really encourage you guys to go ahead and check the description below, because in the description, you'll find a lot of information about Crashhermit. So again, thank you guys so much for being here. And we're going to go ahead and get started in just a few seconds. I am going to go ahead and bring in our special guest, none other than Crashhermit. Hey Crash, how you doing? It's good to see you. Thank you so much for hanging out with us.
Hey there. How's it going, Pax? Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for being here. It's really good to finally get to talk with you because, you know, I think we've had plenty of discussions on Discord and, you know, I went into your live stream a couple times and you've been into mine, and, you know, it's kind of nice to have a little bit of camaraderie. So it's kind of nice to actually get to talk with you, you know, face to face, if you will. So thank you again so much for being here.
Yeah, of course.
So, to start things off, for those of for the people who don't know you, and you know, this is a good chance to kind of get to know you, who you are, and all that stuff. If you can just go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, and also how you even got into the platform of YouTube.
Sure thing. So I guess I'll start out with my pronouns. Number one, he, him. So if anyone wants to use that, you're more than welcome to. Number two, I happen to be like 35 years old. I've done a lot of things in my life, and I've just started streaming recently. And one of the reasons why I kind of started getting into the whole like study streams was initially I was just doing studying on my own, and I just happened to be streaming it to like Twitch and things, right?
Right.
And now that was a pretty lonely experience because Twitch, this isn't really like a popular thing to do. At the best, what would end up happening, someone would come in, we'd talk for a little bit, and then, you know, they would leave. As, you know, most experiences are on Twitch and live streaming in general when you're first starting out, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's just kind of how it goes.
It's like how people just kind of like, you know, they check it out for a second and they're like, okay. Yeah. So
it's like, okay, what's going on here? This is kind of interesting. All right. Well, anyway, bye.
Yeah.
You know?
You're like, okay, bye.
Yeah. You're like, oh, well, I'm alone again. You know, the zero count, the viewer count.
Yeah, I know that all too well.
Oh yeah, yeah. We've all been there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so eventually, like, what I started doing was I started to like double stream, right? Like multi-stream. Did that on Twitch and YouTube for a little bit there. And eventually, I don't know how it ended up happening. Maybe the algorithm just decided that, hey, this is a person who's looking for this kind of particular thing. I happened to see, I think it was James Schultz's stream.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I saw the format of it, and I was like, oh, this is actually really close to what I'm doing already. So I just essentially copied that format at that point. Because before, it was just me, like, with my screen, doing a particular thing. And I thought, okay, well, people would be interested in, like, what I'm particularly studying. Seems that's not really the case. It's more of, like, there's a lot of people seem to want to, like, have someone to be with,
right,
but not necessarily, look for what the content is.
So-
what you're studying.
So, and you said you started about how many months ago? Was it 4 or 5 months ago?
Yeah, roughly, I'd say. 4 or 5 months ago. I had been streaming for off and on for a few years, like on Twitch, before I had done like a lot of art,
Right.
and I was trying to become an artist, and I was doing that pretty. I was doing that like a lot during that time, but eventually I kind of quit that.
So did you go to school for art at
No.
for a certain amount of time, or so what did you go to school for?
So I went to school specifically for a lot. Well, specifically for a lot of things.
Right.
I've been one of those people who like float around the forever student kind of person.
Yeah.
I think it took me like 8 years to actually finish my psychology degree because like I was also trying to do physics at the time. But yeah, psychology is like the actual thing I graduated with. Ended up with like a minor in criminology and physics. There's a whole like like a long.
So I'm
history
kind of
there.
curious. I need to ask, what about criminology that like just like hooked you in?
Well, unfortunately, it was just the only thing I could take as a minor. So that was. Yeah, that was the only thing I had as an option. It wasn't really like it was particularly interesting to me at the time.
Right.
Now so much, like now it is a little bit more interesting to me because it intersects with a lot of like social issues that I happen to care about and these kind of things, right?
Right.
So I see a lot more of like use in that now than I did back then.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, for those who are listening right now, or maybe watching this later on, feel free to check the description for a lot of information on Crashhermit. And so the one of the things that I wanted to talk about was you're pretty open about the things that you talk about on your live stream. Could you tell us a little bit about what topics, because you talked about social issues, what are some things that you're pretty open and honest about talking about on your YouTube platform?
I mean, pretty much anything. But I guess there's like particular things. Now, for example, if you happen to go to my stream or you happen to watch my live stream or like, see like the VODs of it, I have two flags over here. One happens to be like the rainbow flag and the other one happens to be a trans flag. If anyone's like familiar with those. So I might try to make my streams like explicitly supportive and inclusive of anyone who happens to be a part of like the LGBT community and things like that, right? And I do care about these issues quite a bit. So every now and then we'll stumble across topics and we'll talk about those things like during the breaks and such.
I see.
Right.
Yeah, and what is just to kind of revert a little bit back to the study habits and the break times that you were talking about. So in terms of studying, let's talk a little bit about study habits and the study approach you take on your channel. What is it like for you to do a study session, and do you include music? Do you include sounds or anything like that, or what's your approach?
Yeah, so I pretty much use the standard like 50-10. It seems to be what most people like, so I just kind of went with that, right? That's the Pomodoro, technique that probably a lot of people here are familiar with if you happen to be in any study stream community, right? Yeah. And as far as like music and things goes, what I personally, I'm not a music person, right? I'm almost like a musical to an extent. Like I've noticed this with a lot of people, and we've had discussions about this on stream because I've mentioned it before. And it's like, hey, how do most people feel about like music, right? Like some people there's like a wide range of experiences. Some people experience music, they're like, it's almost like a out of body experience, they listen to music and it moves them, right? And then the other people, like on another end of that spectrum, it's just like noise,
It's just something to have in the background.
Yeah, it's just noise. It's almost like grating, and unfortunately, or for I guess whatever happened to, describe that as, it's like I tend to be more on the grating end. A lot of music I find doesn't really like move me emotionally. It just almost is like annoying. You know what I
Really
mean?
interesting.
Yeah,
I because I come from a musical background, so it's really interesting to hear that perspective. I've always been around
yeah,
people who are so musical, so to hear someone like, well, especially when it comes to studying, and of course on the platform that I'm on, with my study stream, you've seen
right,
it.
right.
It's very different to yours, I think.
No, no, yeah,
We're like the polar opposite when it comes to that. But I think it's also interesting because I've been on your live stream a couple times and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Just kind of the overall nature of how just really relaxed you are on live stream, where you're just you have to get work done, of course, but then you're also providing options for your viewers, things like drawing or things like that. Can you tell us how that kind of came into consideration as you were doing live streaming?
yeah, yeah. Of course. So I'm assuming you're more talking about like how I title the streams, right? Like I
Hmm.
include everyone in there,
Yeah.
drawing, crafting, working, whatever it happens to
Yeah,
be. Yeah,
exactly. Hmm.
yeah, the idea was that, like, okay, well, there's a lot of people who do studying, that's fine, but there's plenty of people who don't necessarily do that, right? Like, not everyone's a student. So it's like,
Hmm.
hey, why don't we just open it up, make it more inclusive for basically anyone who happens to want to do any kind of work, right?
Right.
And also, like, kind of in the back of my mind too, I was like, well, there's like art students out there, they're not studying, they're working, right?
Right.
Yeah. So it's like that kind of like idea went from there, and then I was including crafting because, well, Savannah, she happens to craft. I was like, hey, come on, we want to include you in there too,
Yeah. That's cool. So what is one of the things that you tend to talk about the most on your channel during the breaks? Like what are the issues that kind of come up the most in and what are some things that you feel maybe perhaps viewers either get or don't get? Like what is the major thing that you talk about?
Major things that I talk about. It'll be a variety of topics, but I guess like the major thing for me is trying to encourage people to develop like healthy habits, right? Like that's the thing I try to emphasize a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So, I try not to encourage people to study for, hours upon hours upon hours. It's just like
Yeah.
that seems to be counterproductive in almost every respect, right? Like
Right.
mentally and physically, and even for like your own, for actually like learning information.
Mm-hmm.
um, people get burnt out and all that kind of stuff. It's
Right.
from what I can tell, like a lot of that kind of like mentality seems to come from like the medical community specifically, and the way they
Mm-hmm.
structure their like competitive like schools and things.
Well, how do you
And it
feel
seems
about that? Because of the nature of, we've had a couple of people on the podcast who are, well, at least one in particular who's from the medical field, and kind of gave their perspective of like, very similar to what you're saying, actually. Like, it's not necessary to actually go into like 15-hour, 14-hour studies, but, I'm kind of curious to know what you think about that, from a medical perspective. Do you think that that produces toxic productivity or, kind of like where it stemmed from? Or do you feel like things are starting to change? Where are you at with that?
you mean like in regards to the study community in general?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, yeah. I think now that there's a lot of people coming in who, because from my understanding, it seems like, at
Hmm.
least here on, I guess, the side of Europe or so,
Right.
European, like US, a lot of people initially were, like medical students, right? And that was like the study community. And then it was for medical students primarily searching for it. But now that you have people coming in who aren't in the medical field, I feel like there is now starting to be a space, or at least somewhat of an awareness about that,
Hmm.
about like, hey, you don't have to do this, or at least it's not the exclusive model that people look to when they're doing study streams.
Right.
You
And
know,
I'm kind of also curious, and Crash, we talked a little bit about this before we even got started. So, one of the things that I think you're pretty passionate about is helping to educate people and to kind of keep an open mind. I think is one way to put it, perhaps, about
yeah,
certain things that you've been vocal about in your life, and I'd like to actually go into that. Um,
okay,
one of the thing is that you said that you are into. Correct me if I'm wrong. an open relationship of some sort?
Oh yeah, polyamorous one. It just means like multiple relationships that include like love and romance and those kind of things, right?
Right. So,
Yeah, and open relationships are a part of that. But
mhm,
usually polyamory means and it includes like more like romance, like romantic relationships on top of that.
I see. Okay, so and I figured the reason why I wanted to bring that up is because perhaps there's a lot of people who don't understand how that works or
Yeah,
what's involved in that. So if you can kind of maybe dive into that a little bit so that we can
sure.
kind of get an idea of what that means. And for those of you who are watching, before Crash, before you answer a little bit about that, if you have questions for Crash, I'm actually going to go ahead and look into the comments, and Q and Artsy B, if you can go ahead and just look for any questions, and then we can kind of ask Crash during this time. So go ahead,
Yeah.
Crash.
Oh yeah, of course. And by the way, if you happen to have any questions, also Savannah can answer them too if you happen to be in chat because
Okay,
obviously my partner. Yeah.
gotcha, gotcha.
But yeah, so I guess I kind of explained a little bit about what it is exactly, right? But I
Hmm.
mean, really, at the end of the day, polyamory is just like, okay, I have one partner. Normally, like monogamous relationships, I have one partner, right? One
Hmm.
partner, you love each other, you do romance, you have the fun times together.
Hmm.
But polyamory is basically just you open that up to where anyone can kind of like come in. You can have multiple partners. I mean, that at the end of the day, that's what it is, right?
Gotcha.
And how that looks can vary from person to person and from
Hmm.
different groups, right? So, you may have people who, to give kind of an example, like ours, for example, we practice what we call like a kitchen table polyamory, where everyone happens to like, visit each other. We all know about each other. We all like spend time with each other, right? Like
Hmm.
I go over to Savannah's place a lot. I've mentioned that a few times, I spend
Hmm.
like a lot of time. We go over there for dinner and things, and me and her husband hang out and like I help with their kid. And then her husband's partner will come hang out with us and she brings her kid. And then we go all just like a big family kind of thing, right?
Hmm. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious, how does that work? Do you like at a certain point do you close it off, or like do you keep it open? Like how does
Yeah,
that work?
so I think there's like a natural balancing mechanism with that, with
Uh-huh.
because like scheduling, right?
Hmm.
Everyone like needs a little bit of time with their partners and things like that.
Sure.
You don't like you want some attention, stuff like that. So eventually, like once you start getting like 2, 3, 4 partners, it becomes hard to spend like good quality time with each of those,
Hmm.
right? And then of course like scheduling, it becomes like increasingly more complex the number of people you add. So yeah, there tends to be like an upper bound on what most polyamorous relationships, like the number of connections you have,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. So
So
I
yeah,
I actually have a question here that I can start with. The
yeah,
first
go for it.
question, I think, is, let's see, what kind of art did you used to explore, and why did you stop pursuing it? Is art still a passion, but you just don't want to work professionally with it?
Oh, okay, yeah, that's a good question. So the main, I guess the reason I got into art in the past was probably for silly reasons, right? Like I wanted to impress people. That was really at the core of what it was, right?
Yeah.
I think initially it kind of started because I was like doodling sketches in psychology, and people behind me were like, "Oh, that looks really cool," and I was like, "Oh yeah, I want people to call me cool, right? So I'm going to do this more." You know? And then it kind of like developed a little bit from there. But the
Yeah.
main kind of art that I tended to do was more like it was very like technical. I was very interested in like how to go about learning art and like improving techniques on learning art. So
Uh-huh.
one particular thing I happened across was a program called Drawbox. It was an online program, and you're more than welcome to check it out. It's really good. Like I would
Hmm.
suggest it to anyone. But it mainly involves like trying to understand things from a perspective of 3D. So,
Okay.
like, normally, if you're familiar with art, like if you go to art school, you'll do something called sight see drawing. And
Hmm.
that's basically where you look at a thing, you observe it, and then you try to transpose that down on your paper, right?
Hmm.
Proportions and everything like that. And usually it's a two-dimensional kind of thought process to where it's like, okay, here's the outline, I'm looking at that. Here's the shadow, I'm looking at that. That's a line, things like that, right?
Hmm.
The alternative approach to that is to see a thing in 3 dimensions, usually using like solid primitives,
Hmm.
things like cylinders, cones, cubes, stuff like that. Being able to represent those things as those primitive solids and develop it from there, from the ground up. So,
Okay.
but that would be my approach.
Yeah.
And I guess the other question is, why did I stop pursuing it? And is it currently still a passion of mine?
Right.
Yeah. All right. So mentioning back on the flimsiness of my actual motivations going back in, obviously that kind of burnt out after a while, right? Eventually, you know, if it's not something that's grounded very well in like reality, it doesn't work very well.
Yeah.
You know, it's something a little bit more deeper motivation. But I guess I did, to a degree, start getting frustrated because there was a lot of ideas I wanted to express and explore that were very abstract, and I couldn't explore them with art, right? So like, you know, when you're dealing like philosophical stuff, when you're dealing with like, you know, economics or physics and things like that, art, it just can't do it right, you know? In the same way that things like words can or math can.
Well,
So.
I'm kind of curious because do you see a correlation, perhaps a connection with art and mathematics?
Actually, funny thing is that was also a small part of the reason why I had done it initially, because I thought it would make you better at calculus. I don't know what I was thinking. Like, good Lord. But yeah, I mean, I guess it's hard for me to say, like, if there is like some kind of connection with that. There's some sectors of like mathematics that do respond well to like the visual, kind of like visual stuff.
Right.
But like it can get so abstract a lot of times that it's very difficult to kind of like represent it that way, you know?
Yeah.
That sometimes you just, it doesn't work. It doesn't translate well.
Yeah. And so how did you get kind of into what compelled you to just now, was it recent, or did you also go to school for economics and mathematics?
Oh, so this is more of a recent thing, definitely.
Okay.
And so because like what happened with initially is like I went into psychology, and you know, in the same theme of me having like very poor motivations, I wanted to be I was like very insecure about being intelligent, so I wanted to be considered a smart person, and psychology kind of wasn't considered that. So I went into physics, right, to like justify myself. I was like, ugh. Yeah. Anyway, flunked out of that, but I did end up becoming very interested in like at the time I was a part of an LGBT club. And I was doing like protesting at the time. You know, I was marching through like a few places every now and then. I was very like learning about like the whole like political sphere and like you know, social issues and things like that. So that kind of like, you know, that thread carries me forward to now, to where there's like, you know, a large period of my life in between when I flunked out of physics and now, where I was very interested in like the political stuff and like social sciences, right? And now that led me eventually to economics, because economics is like a nice intersection between a lot of those things. Because I'm very interested in like the problems of how to deliver the material like goods and improve the material conditions of people. So economics is definitely like that social science that scratches that itch of the politics and the socials, like the social stuff and issues related to that, and like the mathematics too, which I enjoyed a little bit.
Gotcha. There was another question that is, let's see, how do you keep focused while streaming? Because when I was wait, is that your question?
My question?
Okay, yeah, I'm just gonna. Okay, so how do you keep focus while streaming? Because when I was streaming, I find myself losing focus a lot, as in the back of my head, I have thoughts. Sorry, I'm trying to read this. I have thoughts that people are watching me. Oh, and Alex is the one who asked this. So let me repeat that one more time, just in case it was a little off. How do you keep focus while streaming? Because when I was streaming, I find myself losing focus a lot, as in the back of my head, I have thoughts that people are watching me.
Okay, yeah, I got you. I had the same kind of problem too, right? And I think it's a matter of practice. It's a matter of practice, and also like kind of getting like a little comfortable with yourself. So like that's something that I've had to work on too. When I first started, I can remember times where I was like sweating. Like and it's like there's 3 people in chat and I'm like pouring sweat and I'm nervous and I'm like, oh God, these people are watching me. What's going to happen? And I'm just constantly worried about it, right? But like as I've just practiced and gone along, and I guess in a way kind of like made it or situate. It's like more positive experiences have like lent me to not be so worried.
Mm-hmm.
That eventually that anxiety has like worn away, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah. So I would just summarize that with practice. You know.
At what point,
Yeah.
though?
Do they judge me?
I'm kind of curious to know, like, for you, do you remember the moment that you're like, eh, it's like you know what,
Yeah.
I'm over it now. Like, I got this. It's no big deal. I stream all the time. Do you remember that point, or is it literally like, it was just one day that you just kind of, well, I don't even care. Was it something
Yeah.
overlooked?
Yeah, I think it was something that was overlooked. Like I reflect on it right now, and maybe it was sometime around, maybe like a month ago or so, really, that
Okay.
where it just I think that kind of like thought doesn't inhabit my mind as much. Now it still does, right? Like I still worry about how I do on stream, but it's much more relaxed, right? It's not like an anxiety response. It's more of like I'm just trying to, think about things that would look good on camera, or think about things that to say or entertain and things like that, right? It's a more natural process.
Right. Right. And I do like the fact, like I mentioned when I was on your channel, there's this sort of like, I don't know, just ease, of
Yeah.
how you present yourself on camera that maybe perhaps transfers over to the viewer. And for me personally, when I was in your, I kind of come and go, because of, full-time work, of course. But
Yeah.
when I'm in your chat, I thoroughly enjoy it because of the, just the nice flow of it. It's just kind of like, oh, this is nice.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think it does transfer. People pick up on the vibes of things. If you're, if you're angry or if you happen to be sad, people are going to pick up on that. And that's going to set kind of like the mood. And especially
Right.
you being the one up there, people are getting like all the information coming in about the tone, a lot of times coming from you, right?
Right.
So like you're pretty much the one who, for the most part, sets the mood of the entire thing with your own like, emotions and such, and the way you conduct yourself and how comfortable you feel. And, like I said, people pick up on that.
Right. So another question that we have here for you is, are you planning to do a video about other subjects like environment or ideas or concepts outside the streams?
Yeah, of course. As a matter of fact, I've been doing a little bit of like experimenting with just me live streaming and commenting on things, more of a free flow kind of stuff. But I actually just did one. You can see it on my channel, where me and a roommate were actually talking about or watching a debate between two people who happen to be debating on what is a woman and what is gender, right? Like as a concept,
Mm-hmm.
and how do we go about defining that in a legal or a philosophical way? So yeah, like he and I were doing that. We were commenting on that. I also have one where I was kind of doing some research on gentrification. Another one like urban planning, which is something that I've really gotten into because I hate cars. Because you probably know that I've had car issues. You might have heard,
Yeah.
Anyone who happens to like frequent my streams know that me and my brother happen to have had a lot of car issues. So maybe that spurred that interest on a little bit.
Probably. Yeah. And do you have any future goals or ideas for your channel?
Future ideas and goals. Yeah, so I'm kind of like in that same vein as I want to branch out a little bit more. Like I enjoy the study streams and I use them as a time to study for myself too, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I want to make more content that is study related to that. I'm actually working on something right now. I kind of put like a little bit of a teaser on it because it was like a 3-minute clip that I put on a live stream. But like effective study techniques would be one of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of trying to summarize the research on the most like effective things you can do. For example, space repetition and like the testing effect being the two big ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I help kind of like guiding people to focus on that. That way they can actually like learn more efficiently and not spend so much time like utilizing tactics like rereading, which is basically pointless,
I would have to agree with that. I read a case study that pointed out that if you read, like, a person who's basically reading and then rereading, they're like doing 250 words per minute and staying on that for like a good solid 20 minutes on the same page. just kind of
Yeah.
staring at it. They're
Yeah.
not really taking it in. They're not understanding the concepts that are being introduced there. I think they're focusing a little too much on maybe syntax, grammar, whatever it is, but or maybe
Right.
zoning out.
They got the highlighting problem. Everything just ends up being highlighted, and you ask them like 10 hours later, like, what were you reading? Like, I don't know.
Well, and I'm kind of curious because, like, how were you when it came to test taking, and how did you approach, like, homework and things like that? I'm kind of curious to know what your experience was.
Garbage. I mean, that was garbage at it.
Huh.
Most of my experience with like testing was basically like most other people's, right? Like I didn't know what studying was. I didn't know how to study. No one teaches you how to do that, right? No one teaches you what's a good way of going about doing that or what's a bad way of going about doing that. We all just kind of like glean it from everyone else,
Right. Mm-hmm.
So like, yeah, it wasn't until really I got into psychology and specifically a class on human memory and learning that I actually come into contact with, number one, the idea of even like thinking about, maybe this isn't the best way to do things. That thought really never crosses most people's mind. Right. And it didn't cross mine either. And yeah, so like being exposed to the ideas of like actual like empirical research that shows like, hey, this is actually like, there's some really like good gains you could have here. Like, and you're like, you don't have to spend so much time doing this stuff. You can do this and have a lot more time for yourself.
Yeah. There is another question for you. Did you sometimes feel like you don't want to stream and you force yourself to do it?
Absolutely. That's just kind of the part where it's like, it's one of those things like to kind of be successful, I think. Now, mind you, I'm not in like the upper echelons of things. So, take that with a grain of salt. But what I've heard from other people is that a consistent schedule is something that, is really beneficial towards like bumping yourself up and getting a viewer base and all these kind of things. Right. I think that's just kind of like common knowledge. Mm-hmm. So yeah, like a lot of times there's been times where I didn't want to stream and I did kind of force myself to do it. Right. To keep in line with like that, to keep that schedule going and keep like a place for people to keep coming back to. So yeah.
And where for you, did you do that because of how you you had mentioned at one point that you did it because it's less lonely for people to just know that there's another person in the room,
Right.
So for you, like, is that what compelled you to want to do it when you didn't want to do it, or is it like I just got to be consistent and hope that I feel better by getting to meet new people or something like that? Where was the mindset for you on that?
There's a little bit of both. There's one part of me that's like career oriented, right? Like to some degree, I do consider this like a job for myself, right?
Yeah.
So it's like on that respect, it's like, okay, I have to be consistent. I have to be self-disciplined and things like that. But also like what kind of motivates me at the end of when I actually get into the stream is the people there, right? Like I enjoy interacting with people. I enjoy like talking with people, all the people that come in, they're like, hey, how's your day? And like that kind of stuff. But I really do enjoy that. Like that's probably one of the things that like keeps me coming back, right, is those interactions with people and seeing that, to some degree that you're making people's lives a little bit better, right?
And in turn, does that probably, I mean, I can speak for myself. Like there's a lot of times that I don't want to stream. I think it was in the month of March, I kind of went crazy. I was doing a lot of streaming and, there's times where I'm like, I really don't want to stream. I can't do it. For me, the outcome was like, because I was consistent and I was there, it provided a place where people didn't feel as lonely, and so it made me feel good, like I was doing something good for someone else, and I can only imagine that's perhaps the outcome you felt, whether you didn't feel good or not, like you felt better towards the end of the stream. Is that accurate?
Oh yeah, that's accurate. Like yeah, definitely. Like a lot of times it'll be like getting started is probably the hardest part. Usually once you get started though, like, things get a little bit easier for you. And like you start to, you feel the positivity and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it definitely is like, yeah, like that. I will say though, regarding like scheduling in general, number one, I'm terrible at scheduling. I'm so garbage at it. but like there has been times when I've like pushed myself a little too hard and I started to feel things like burnout coming on, and I had to like pull back a little bit. So I always try to be mindful of that, like as doing streaming and things like that, to make sure to be mindful personally of like burnout and stuff, because I got to take care of myself first, otherwise the channel goes down too, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. So where was the time that you noticed that, and like was it a certain amount of hours that you were dedicating to studying, or was it certain amount of days, or was it both? Like what happened and how did that happen?
Yeah. So it definitely was like, I mean, it seems like with the study community in general, like the more hours you put in, the better results you're going to get for the most part, right? Like the algorithm just pushes you up with the more hours you put in.
Yeah.
So like, it creates that kind of like toxic incentive for you to stream for like as many hours as possible if you want to grow faster, or, whatever it happens to be, right?
Yeah.
So it's like there was a point when I was trying to like grow more, and I was like, excited. And this was like a little bit of like a medium growth stage. I was like, I'll do like 8 hours a day every day. But like that starts to wear on you a little bit, especially if you have like relationship outside, or if you have, if it's just like it's tiring to some extent, because like streaming can be a little bit tiring,
Yeah.
when you're on camera, you're performing, these kind of things, like entertaining and such. So yeah.
Have you actually like ever split your day, so where you maybe perhaps live streamed early in the day and then took a rest and then came back, or was it just ongoing? Like what's the majority of your streams like?
So for me, I mostly just do like 4 hours or so, because to me, I feel like that's a healthy amount to do.
Yeah.
Right. And that's for me what seems to work out personally. Like around like 4-ish or so hours, I'm kind of already tired. I'm ready to lay down for a nap. Now, I have wanted to do like a little bit longer streams here and there. And what I do in that case, if I happen to want to like, do a double session or something, double fours, is that I take like an hour-long nap in between, right? I'll just like, hey, we're going to a long break. Y'all do whatever. I'll leave the stream open. And I'm just going to go lay down on my bed, and kind of chill for a little bit. Right. And then I come back usually refreshed.
Yeah. I think I tend to do, when I do a live stream, I usually tell people, okay, I'm going to go get some food. I'm going to feed Linus, which is my golden retriever dog back here.
Yeah.
And I'll be back, after like a Pomodoro or something like that. Not once have I been able to actually like lay down and sleep, because if I sleep, I'm gone. Like,
yeah.
There's no coming back. Like, it's hard. Like, I'm a heavy sleeper, so I'm not able to just lay down for like a power nap of an hour and then just you wake up. I can't do that. So I kind of admire the fact that you're able to do that and then come back to the stream.
Well, I say sleep, but the thing is like I'm not one of those people. I can't just lay down and fall asleep.
Right.
Like very rarely will I be able to take like an actual nap.
Gotcha.
I'll lay down and like rest would be a better way of saying it.
And perhaps that is also helpful when you're streaming, because now I don't know about you, but do you have like a light in front of you, or is it just natural lighting? Because that also does affect how you feel during a live stream.
Oh yeah, definitely. I got 2 like floodlights basically right here in front of me,
right?
And I have them bouncing off the wall. So yeah, it can be pretty bright, and that can like wear on the eyes a little bit.
Yep, I know the feeling. Trust me.
Yeah, the being baked in like the LEDs.
Well, and it's funny because when I first started the channel, I had like 3 different lights straight at my eyes, and it burns my eyes so bad. So now I have this camera lens where it does really well with low lighting. And, my background's in film editing and technology and whatnot. So I have that, I've had that for quite some time. And I do have lights that actually reflect against the wall and provide this kind of interesting look to make it look like basically there's lights in front of me.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I do. But when I first started, it was like a flood of lights, and at the end of perhaps even 4 hours, even 2 hours, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so done.
Yeah, your retinas are like seared, you have smoke coming out of your eyes.
I was like, ah. So another question that we have, and we're getting a lot of really good questions here.
Yeah, I see
Um,
that.
so the question is, do you want to do YouTube as a career, or are you working towards a career in something else post-pandemic, such as economics?
Um, like right now, the goal is I treat this as a career, so this is kind of like the idea, right?
Mm,
I'm a little bit burnt out of school, to be perfectly honest, and I'm a little bit wary of like spending money on it. Again, I
sure.
already have a degree, so unless I were going for like something like a graduate degree, if I were able to get into something like that, then yes. But right now, for my own personal kind of thing, like yeah, this is kind of what I'm doing.
Mhm.
But yeah, so that's. But as I do have the idea of going into economics, I would like to pursue like a PhD in economics. That seems like a cool idea to me.
Mm.
I would like to do that, but for right this moment, not right now.
Well, and this may be a little bit of a tangent, but um, how do you feel about the whole? And this is going to be a pretty big topic, I think. But in terms
Okay.
of education, how do you feel about the price of getting our education? And do you think it's a bit crazy?
So this is actually really interesting because what I was looking into just the other day, and I probably bored Savannah to death with this, unfortunately, was I was looking at like there's I forget the exact name of it, but there's kind of another name for it. It's like cost disease, right? There's a
Mm,
few industries and there's a few sectors like in the U.S. economy, and I think most economies around the world, to where you have extremely inflated prices that go
mhm,
well above what you'd see normal cost of like normal goods and services, right? So healthcare is one of those. Education's another one. I'm trying to think of some more. Housing's another one, right?
yeah,
That
that's a big
these
one.
yeah, like all of these seem to be inflating at like extremely high rates, but we don't quite know why. Right?
Hmm.
There's not like a good understanding of why these things. Now we can point to many different things like administration cost and like offer it like here in the US, like offering loans to people, and that like makes incentivizes these colleges to charge whatever. But like at the end of the day, it doesn't seem from what I've been able to find, like no one really quite knows exactly why they keep going up so much. Because even if we look at like the public sector,
Hmm.
right? Like not just ignore colleges for a moment and like the loans and the private, like all that stuff.
Right.
When you look at things like public sector, you're still seeing massive increases in the amount of money spent on those like elementary and like pre-K or K-12, sorry, that's what I'm thinking of,
Yeah.
without like any increase in the quality of outcome, right?
Mm. Hmm.
So like testing scores have basically stayed the same since like the 70s, but I think it was somewhere around like 8 times, like we spend 8 times as much even after accounting for inflation compared to like from the 70s and onward.
Hmm.
So
Interesting. And
yeah,
I mean, I find that interesting too, because the majority of people that I talk with, me being an educator as well, like that's kind of the realm that I'm in. The topic is always about, like, why is college so expensive? Like,
yeah,
I don't quite understand why I have to spend 50 plus, $1,000 for an education, you know?
right.
And perhaps a lot of people, students out there especially, are trying to figure out, like, should I even go to college? Because I don't even have the funds for it. So how am I even gonna make it work?
Yeah. I think like if you're trying to answer that question, I guess it depends on like what your goals are, right? If you're just looking at it for like a financial decision, then probably. It seems that even with like the high cost of education, that the outcomes of college graduates as an aggregate are much better off. You're much better off as a college graduate than like a high school one, even after accounting for like the debt you may accumulate. Now, there's of course things that people do that make their debt extremely high. Like, for example, if you're getting a bachelor's degree, it probably doesn't matter what school you go to, and no employer is going to really care. They're just
Right.
checking a box.
Yeah.
Like, so a lot of people will end up racking up massive amounts of debt going for like the college experience.
Right.
So you can do a lot of things like go 2 years to a community college and then go to like maybe like a no name state college and probably have about the same level of education with like half the debt.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been somewhat of a proponent, I suppose, for like community college, junior college, and
Yeah,
then taking that route, and then perhaps going into a university of your choice where you focus on the thing that you've already taken 2 years to kind of think through, like, okay, I don't want mathematics, I don't want English, but I love history or whatever it may
Yeah.
be. Perhaps that gives you time to also, like if you needed to spend time away from college, I mean, it's not as big of a deal because you're not losing so much money. Versus going to a university where it's like you're investing so much time and so much money and so many resources that perhaps people tend to resent, I think, their college experience because of the overwhelming debt, that they're just
Yeah.
like, well, everybody else is doing it, so I guess I had to, because in order to get a good job, I have to not only get the BA, but I have to get somewhat of a master's. Would you agree
Right.
with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that to some. Yeah, well, the first part definitely yes.
Hmm.
Like I would definitely I worked at a grocery store for a while, right? Like with a lot of people who are very young, coming out of high school, going into college. One of the advice I'd always give them is, please, for God's sakes, do not go to like just like a college, right? Go to like a community college first. Play around with some things. See what classes you like. They're cheap as hell, right?
Hmm.
And if you don't know what you actually want, because you're more than likely, like 90% of the time, you're going to change your major like 6 times or something.
Right.
So don't spend like $10,000 a year to not even know what you're going to do.
Right. Right.
Yeah, definitely.
But I think if you get somewhere into the middle, let's say perhaps you get 2 years in junior college or community college, whatever you want to call it. Um, do you think that the mindset of going to university is it really that much more important than just sticking maybe with the same college that you're at? I mean, is the education level different?
From what I can tell, at least at that level, probably not, unless a few specialized circumstances, right?
Mm,
Like if you're going to like MIT or Harvard or something, and you're part of like research, if there's like a very specific thing you're going for that you happen to know, yeah, then that could probably work out. But otherwise, that I don't think so.
mm,
Like it doesn't seem to work out very well, from what
right.
I can tell. Because a lot of people just kind of go, they don't know what they're doing, or they'll get their bachelor's and just kind of like, oh, well, that's it, I guess. I don't know, with no plans like getting like a master's later and things like that. Like myself, like I'm a good example of that.
Yeah, yeah. I was actually told once. A friend of mine actually said, like, you can, nothing against people who do basket weaving, of course, but you can get a degree in basket weaving for
Yeah,
all you care, and just like that perhaps might not be enough to get a job in certain places, but again, it depends on the area of interest, I think, right?
yeah,
The field of study. So perhaps it comes down to that, because I know for in education at least, a master's is nothing.
yeah.
It's nothing.
Yeah, it will depend on where you're at. Like a bachelor's degree in like electrical engineering is going to go a lot farther than almost like sometimes in case like a PhD in psychology, right?
Yeah, yeah. Here's another question for you, Crash. What are some
Sure.
other hobbies that you have besides streaming and studying, and how often do you get to enjoy your hobbies?
Other hobbies. So I do like to pop on random discords and like argue with people. That's always fun for me. If you're interested in anything, because I like watching the debate bro kind of stuff. If you're familiar with any of those kind of things, yeah.
Hmm.
So I like watching people like Destiny and these kind of people, and then I'll go into the discords, and there's always cool conversations to be had there. Sometimes they're completely pointless. Most of the time they're completely pointless, but sometimes you get some good things out of it.
Sure.
But yeah, that happens to be one of them. Yeah, unfortunately, I guess I don't really. I mean, I like exercising and things like that, but
Okay.
I guess like beyond that, not a whole lot. Sometimes I play video games, but I haven't found like it's not that I haven't had like a lot of time for that recently. It's just haven't felt like the want to do that as much as anymore. I don't know. I like having good discussions, that's for sure. Philosophical discussions always like are fun for me. Something that's esoteric, something that's completely out there. Give me the weird hypotheticals, and I'll love to entertain them.
Interesting. So when I hear you say argument, do you literally mean argument in the sense of like um a discussion, because that's really truly I think the working definition of an argument is, this is my argument, this is your argument, we're having a
Yeah.
discussion about it, or do you mean fighting?
I mean, it sometimes, oscillates between both, depending on how passionate you feel.
Right.
So yeah, it can go. I have done in the past where I would like, for example, like some political discords have like a wide range of people, all the way from like, far left, far right of spectrum, right? So I've had like opportunities to talk to people who are like legitimate Nazis, all the way, communists, etc., like all the way down the spectrum. And it's interesting for me to try to like figure out how to pull people like from that side a lot of times, or to give like compelling arguments for those kind of things, and try to kind of pull away from that,
So what is a typical study session like? The time and breaks. Wait, no, sorry. So okay, let me see if I can rephrase this, because it was, I think, broken into two different questions. What is a typical? Okay, this question was.
Whose question was it?
Okay, well, let me see if I can just go into it again. So in the end, do you consider your followers as your friends?
Oh, okay. Actually, this is a good one. I guess it depends on what you mean by friend. Like, I enjoy interacting with people and I enjoy my followers, but there is a barrier I want to keep up there, right? Like, it's between the personal and what I consider like almost like a business kind of thing. I want you to enjoy what's being done here, and I want you to take away good and positive feelings from that. But I don't want to have people develop what I would consider like parasocial relationships. Are you familiar with that?
Slightly, very slightly.
Slightly. Okay, so more from like a parasocial relationship is a relationship that usually forms with like some kind of like media figure, right? Like, so streamers are a really good example of this, but you can also do it with like things like celebrities, whatever. But the idea is that it's like the person on the end of the stream, it feels like they know that streamer like really well and consider that person like a friend, and like, like will sometimes even come to that person with like, personal stuff, right? But there's no way that like as a public figure, you can know everyone on a personal level, right? That's just impossible. Like, when you start to get up to like people like hundreds, thousands of people, it's impossible to do so. The parasocial relationship portion of that is like, that's the kind of thing that I worry about and try not to encourage for the best. There's like a separation there. This is kind of like a business transaction between you and me. I provide like a service to some extent, and in return, like, we like have this transaction, right? Because I worry about that, because it can lead to some pretty bad outcomes for people, and it can lead to a lot of like heartache and such. Because we're like, this person you think is like you're, like a really close friend, but just can't be that, and I don't want to set people up for that expectation, right? In addition to that, I want to inoculate people further when going on the internet, because there will be people who take advantage of that, right? They will foster those parasocial relationships with you. This happens a lot of times with teenagers and like streamers, to where they'll be like, yeah, man, you can be my friend. Just give me like $10, Hey, yeah, come talk with me. Like, things like that, right? And like that, I consider like fairly exploitive, especially when you're doing it to like, people who are lonely and things like that. So yeah, a long-winded answer on that one.
Oh no, it was a good. It's interesting for me, because like I said, I slightly know a little bit about that. I don't know a lot about the subject, so it was really interesting to kind of hear your take on it. I personally, I've said this before to a couple of people that I've talked to recently, actually, and that, they've asked me like, you seem to be pretty open and honest when you're on YouTube. So where do you draw the line? And is there any line of some sort? And I'm like, well, yeah, there's boundaries. You have to have some sort of boundaries, because these people, they kind of get to know who you are, to the point where it's like, I would say almost for some people, perhaps, I know for me, sometimes I could feel somewhat exposed. And for some others, they perhaps don't feel that way. I know for me, when I first started out, I felt like, whoa, this is pretty intense. I don't know how to almost behave. don't know if I can even be myself. But that
Right.
naturally, that went away real fast.
Yeah.
And I think it was because of the people who supported me at the time during the channel that, once I first started. So I guess from the key word being boundaries, because
Yeah.
they may know who you are, but you have no idea really about them at all. And I think
Yeah.
that's why perhaps, I know for me, I feel somewhat exposed at the very beginning of it, and I think at times, sometimes I still do. But
Yeah.
that's why it's important to have boundaries, because you don't want somebody to cross that, to have a certain expectation, and then you know that expectation is not met.
Right. There's a
Because
lot of
then
disappointment that can come from that. Like someone
yeah,
will maybe like send you an email about like their very personal problems or something like that, and you're like, I'm sorry, like I don't know anything about this. Like I can't help you with this,
mm,
and like that it's like it feels bad because you do want to like help that person. Like, okay, you're
right,
in a bad situation. Like I get that, and I want to talk, but it's like you can't do that just from even like a time perspective. Because if you
right,
have like hundreds of people talking to you, like you're not going to be able to like spend the time and emotional energy to like talk with each of these people, right? Like
hmm,
it's just impossible. So it's good, I think, to set up from the beginning those boundaries and kind of like draw those lines to make sure everyone knows what you're going in, like the expectations going in.
yeah, yeah. Another question is: have you met people online that eventually did become a friend in real life?
I'm trying to think here. If there's ever been a situation like that that's happened. I honestly can't think of a situation because most of the people that I have in my life have always been like, physically close to me. So, that's a thing too. Like they're probably, I can see that happening. Like I want to make this clear, like with something like that. It's not that you can't like when you're doing live streams, it's not that friendships can't form. You can like, get close to people and
Oh,
things like
sure.
that.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, there can be like friends you make online, even if you are like a public figure, right?
Right.
Like even through like potentially like a fan base. So like that's possible to do, right? I can
Right.
see like ways that's not exploitive or, those kind of things.
Hmm.
But yeah, so like wait, where was I going with that? Sorry. What was the question? Sorry.
Well, we were just talking about boundaries and just
Badger Dad.
and having real friends, or like
Oh, the online.
yeah, from online, yeah.
Yeah, I guess I kind of answered that question. But yeah, it was like that. So like yeah, you can have friends online, things like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's definitely like a space for that.
Yeah, I mean, there. I, I guess I would definitely say that in the people that I've gotten to know, like I mentioned in the podcast that I had with Laura.
Yeah.
So Laura Byrne, and she's in the chat right now too. Which hi Laura, um, or if anybody's keeping track, Sarah. Uh, that didn't
I'll be
happen.
keeping an eye on
Anyways,
chat.
but yeah, I just remember the first time that she kind of just reached out.
Yeah.
I personally saw it as just like, hey, my name's Laura. I'm another streamer. A couple of friends online told me about you, so I just wanted to say hello. I thought that was
Yeah,
very
definitely.
friendly, and that was very kind. And I consider her a friend, because
Right.
she was very friendly and she's very sweet and kind. And I love that she approached it in a very like, hi, I just want to say hello.
Yeah, yeah, of
Um,
course.
nothing behind that approach necessarily. It was nice to have, and so that led me to a place where I was reaching out to then people like Study with Melly, Ace Studies with you, Crash, and
Yeah.
for me personally, I like to consider us getting to know each other over time, that we become friends in a
Yeah.
manner of speaking. But I think at the same time there is that boundary. Like we're
Right.
still, we
There's like
haven't gotten
degrees
there.
there.
What's that?
There's like degrees there, right?
Yeah.
Like with any kind of like personal relationship, you have like completely unfamiliar to like the most like intimate person, right? And like everyone exists kind of somewhere along that spectrum,
Right.
right? So usually when I talk, people use friends. Sometimes that I think the when we're talking about it, like it could be a very fuzzy boundary of what we're talking about. I
Sure.
get to further clarify what I was saying earlier. I mean that like last category of more like intimate, like friends area.
I gotcha.
You see what I
Okay.
mean?
Yeah, that makes okay. I get you.
like there's that space in between where it's like a positive acquaintance where you know the person,
Right.
you know, like that kind of thing, right? But
Yeah.
it's not quite like the person that's like here with you, you know, you're going out to drink with them, like that kind of thing. Like there's like a degree of separation.
I
That's
see
what I
you're
mean
saying.
by that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And another question that we have here is, what do you think of people that come to your stream to attack others? And how do you react and behave in a trolling situation? Any particular
Yes.
tactics that you use?
So we actually had one fun one last night. Someone had to come in from Twitch. This isn't like a, you know, this isn't like a, the best example, but it's still fun. Someone was coming in, just kind of, you know, being trollish and like asking me to take off my shirt and things. I'm like, yeah, okay. You know, hey, you know, maybe not right now, maybe a little bit later. It's like, hey, what about your brother? Like, can you take his shirt off? I'm like, you know what? Actually, why don't you just donate real quick and we'll consider it.
You know, playing the strings a little bit, right?
Yeah, it's like, hey, man, just we'll consider doing it if you know drop a few dollars.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, you know, try to like fool. It's like, oh, well, you know what? Hey, I had fun with the interaction, you know.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, well, you know, hey, I'm off now. And that was it. But like, you can have more malicious people come in too, right?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
that's a fun example.
Right.
Like, the more malicious people can come in. I've had a few in the past, and they range, right? Like, you have people who come in right out the gate who are just like, using like ad hominems. They'll just call you like ugly or something, or they'll say you look disgusting, or you're like a pedophile, or you're a rapist, or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Like people have come up because I have like political videos on my channel, so people will come in from there and like that kind of stuff.
Oh, okay.
So those people are really like, I actually like those kind of people because they're very easy to deal with. You know, it's just an immediate ban. I don't have to think about it again, right? Now, the people I find the most like, I'm not gonna say annoying, but like infuriating to deal with are those ones that kind of like get into your community with a very particular purpose, and that's like to stalk people, right? Like they'll see like for like I've had like guys come into my chat from Twitch and things, and they see that, oh, there's women in the chat, so they'll like, you know, be friendly with the chat and like kind of get there, and they'll use it to get close, and then they'll start like harassing people, like usually off stream, like to like get in and like start talking, like doing these kind of things, right? Those are the people that I really don't like. Yeah. Because like that, I don't like that intention. I don't like that sneakiness.
Right. And I'm with you on that. 100%. I hate that. Yeah. That they like, they're looking. I mean, that's, man. I may have already talked about this in the past, but on multiple occasions, I've said like, you know, there's just really like, we have so many, like the study streamers that I've had on my podcast, Laura being one of them, you know,
yeah,
she's had to deal with a lot of stuff. And I to be honest, this is just being honest, but you know, I don't really deal with anything near as much as the study streamers like Laura or study A studies or Sarah or anything like that. You know, I don't deal with anything close to what they deal with. And it gets me upset because I'm like, really? Like this is what people are doing behind the scenes. They're like attacking, you know, women in the chat. They're, you know, perhaps trying to like lure them, and like, I don't know. I don't know how else to explain it other than I really get aggravated and very upset about it.
Yeah, same. Laura and I have talked about this before because you know, we share a lot of like the same people. And we actually have like a good like test case for this too, where we can see like the differences between the way people like treat me and the way people treat Laura, right? So like people on Laura's stream, like I think we had a very specific example of this. There was a particular person who was being very belligerent in their chat like all the time, right? They wouldn't listen to mods, they wouldn't like, you know, listen to Laura, etc., etc. Now they come to my chat, I would say a thing, they would immediately follow, they listen to my mods, etc. And like that kind of behavior is very frustrating to me because my guess, I don't know this because it's hard to infer like where a person's mind is at, you know, but like a lot of the feeling, my guess on like what's going on underneath there is the fact that like they respect men more. They respect anyone who's like perceived as a man more, right? Like that just seems to be like underlying what that is right there. They just don't respect like people who are perceived as women. And that's, you know, at the end of the day, that's why they keep doing that.
Yeah, and I would agree with that as well. I think that just they're it's almost like they're a target, you know, and it's just it's kind of upsetting. here's another question, and if anybody else has another question, we'll take maybe another 2 more questions. So this question is: lots of negative things out there, but what are 3 things that you are grateful for today?
Grateful for today. Definitely my health, number one. Considering the situation,
Right.
I'm great. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was gonna say, like, and you got the vaccine.
Yeah,
And,
yeah. Actually,
yeah, we were not sure if this was actually gonna happen, but we're like, hey, you know what? If it doesn't, we'll just reschedule. No biggie. But I'm really glad you're feeling okay.
yeah, I am too. Unfortunately, Savannah isn't, and my heart goes
Oh.
out to her. Love you, babe.
Oh
Sorry.
my gosh, I'm so sorry, Savannah. I hope you feel much better.
Yeah, she's unfortunately experiencing some side effects a little bit more severely than I. I just had some like chills and a little bit of a fever, or like a little bit of chills last night, and that was about it.
Mhm.
I slept just fine. But okay, so that's number 1, my health. Number 2, I guess would be my mental health now, right? Like I've gone quite a bit upwards in that respect. Yeah. So I've had some like difficulties with anxiety and depression, like a lot of people do. I completely understand, like coming from that perspective, or a lot of people have that kind of thing. And I'm thankful that I'm at a point now to where like I've been able to be in a healthier place mentally. And I'm definitely, and I guess third thing would be I'm thankful for the people around me who like support me, friends, family members, and the live stream, and like the viewers too. Like you guys have really helped out my mental health quite a bit too. I just want to mention that, like please think like me interacting with y'all and like this positive experiences and the love and everything y'all give is definitely something I enjoy. It's definitely something that's helped me out a lot. I know Savannah's seen it before. I'll talk sometimes about like streams and things, and definitely if I have like a positive experience, she'll see me glowing, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I would echo that. Like for me personally, like I there's days where I'm not feeling great, and then the people in the live chat, they really do kind of it's funny because there's days where I think you give them a positive message, you give them some sort of kindness, they return it to you, they really do, and it makes you feel like, whoa, this is thank you for that, guys. Thank you for the reminder as well of how things will get better eventually. And it's nice that you're able to provide that positivity, that kindness, inclusivity, and I think that's why, perhaps I would say that's why people return to your live stream, is because they feel welcomed,
Yeah, of course. I think so too, because that's like when you want to create an environment where people are safe and happy and positive.
Yeah.
And like it reflects in your community.
Absolutely. Do you plan on filming the poly sorry, I'm having
Polyamory.
Polyamory video soon, Crash?
That was from Savannah, wasn't it?
I think so. I don't. It doesn't say.
Yeah, I'm looking at chat. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I see it. Yes.
I'm having trouble with that word. Apparently.
Yeah, I actually like. We still have Savannah and I made a document.
Okay.
And we still have like a lot of that up there. So yes, eventually we would like to, one of these days, film the polyamory video. Like it's a bunch of stuff, right? Like what it is, things like scheduling and just practical concerns, things like jealousy, right? Like jealousy is always a fun one. That's like the big one.
I think that's probably perhaps one of the questions I have is like, people's emotions and how does that work when there's more people involved?
Oh yeah.
So yeah.
And I can explain a little bit right here if you want.
Yeah. Feel free to do that. I was just noticing in the chat, Savannah saying haha, and I was like, yeah, I'm sorry. I had a really hard time getting that word out.
Yeah.
But yeah,
so
please, go for it.
Yeah. So in regards to things like jealousy, this is going to be something that I don't know if it's like a fundamental difference that for me, I will speak for myself right now, that I don't seem to experience jealousy in the same way that I've seen other people experience it, right? In the sense that I don't really seem to experience it. I don't know why. I don't know. I cannot like pin that down, right? And I don't want to make this, because like sometimes when I say that, I feel like I'm like, a holier than thou kind of person. But like I just happened to discover this more recently.
Mm-hmm.
about like 2 years ago when I was in a relationship with someone, um, long distance. That's what
Mm.
word I was thinking there. But yeah, I was in a long distance relationship with someone, and like, because of like the distance, physical kind of stuff is very difficult to get into, obviously, right? So they were like, hey, what about we open this up, and that way I can have my needs met, and that way, it was a lot happier. I'm like, yeah, go for it.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, hold on, what? You're okay with that? I'm like, yeah, of course. Like that makes sense, right? Like it makes sense to me.
Mm.
But like I guess I kind of didn't realize like that's not a normal thing that most people's thought process goes, like the normal thought process, right? Like the most
Right.
people are like, no, what are you talking about? You don't love me anymore. Like that, like there's that kind of thought that goes into it. Jealousy equals love almost, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't. It's hard for me to speak with other people in regards to that. But yeah, being jealous, having that like the like sense of being hurt by another person, having someone else, have your partner paying attention to someone else,
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty detrimental to a polyamorous relationship. Like it's something that you can't really have too much of, otherwise it like really poisons things.
Mm.
So if I were to ever give like a suggestion to anyone who's like looking into exploring this from a personal perspective, like if you wanted to like, hey, am I polyamorous? Do I want to try this out? Be very cautious, right? Because like have like communication with your partners if you happen to be opening up a relationship. Check in very often, because sometimes people will be like, oh yeah, I'm not jealous, but then they get to like a certain point and then they discover that actually this is not okay for them, and they can like ruin relationships, So it's just be very careful. Very careful. Yeah, but yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, like polyamorous people do experience jealousy. It's just like there's usually like better tools of dealing with it. That I guess would be a final on that one.
Okay. Do you? Oh, sorry. I guess this is the last question. And would you do a video on the LGBTQ plus community or education? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't see why not. Like, I would like to do something like that. This is all part of like, things we're trying to do, but very difficult to actually start.
Right. Yeah. And plus you're also live streaming quite a bit, now do you live stream every day, or do you take like a certain amount of days off, or how's that work for you?
Yeah, I take days off. Like me and Savannah will have like usually I think it's like Wednesdays right now, and like Saturdays are kind of like Wednesday's like a date night for us, and like Saturday's kind of like a family night kind of deal for like all of us to kind of get together, and also could be like a date night for us too. But yeah, I do have like days off, usually like Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and I guess Wednesday now too would be kind of like the night that I have off. But yeah, since the way my time works is generally like from 1 to 5 for myself, and then from like 5 onward is like free time for me. So yeah.
Well, and I would say that that's really important, right? To have a certain amount of time where you do have freedom to do other things, other interests and hobbies like that. So it's good that you're able to do that,
Oh yeah, of course. And like just from a like a YouTube business quote unquote perspective, also I think it's important to like branch out and like have diversity of views and tactics, because like I could drill in on this like study with me thing, right? But that's only going to get an audience of study people, and if I happen to not want to do that later on, or
Right.
whatever, well, that audience will evaporate. So like for me, it's like a good idea. Like I personally like having a diversity of like content.
Right. And I suppose I'm trying to do the same thing, within education. I'm doing like, vlogs and things like that. I have different interests as well. Oh, and one thing that I do that's different, that's on the side of it, of Study With Me streams, is that I have a channel that's dedicated to like movies and music,
Yeah,
and I find that really entertaining and fun. And I think I saw Hey Archer here actually in the chat somewhere.
Yeah.
So Hey Archer and myself and another guy named Aaron Waller, YouTubers, we get together, we talk about movies, that's kind of the fun thing that we enjoy. And like, I have to do the same thing. I have to make sure I give myself time to do fun things, because I'm not saying that studying isn't fun, because I think the venture itself can be fun. You're learning new
Yeah.
concepts and things like that. But I think there's a certain level of live streaming that you're doing that you're just like, okay, this is a little too much. I need time
Right.
for myself and, things like that.
Yeah, like a little bit of like time where you're not on the camera
Exactly.
or the
Because,
camera's not on you.
yeah, well, because I mean, at the end of the day, you're just kind of like, it's a lot, just
Yeah.
having people always constantly watch you and see you, like every move you're making, all your mannerisms. And I think that's why I went even back to the idea of like, that's why you need boundaries,
Yeah.
and I think you agree with that idea of
Oh, yeah.
having certain amount of boundaries.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
You open your, like, you do that too much, you burn out. You don't have
absolutely.
those kind of boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hey, Crash, I want to thank you so much. I really, I enjoyed this time. I enjoyed getting to know you a little bit better.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that we included more of the questions from the chat this time around. I tend to ask a lot of the questions that I have, and just kind of it almost felt in maybe previous sessions where I was ignoring, but I wasn't ignoring the chat. I was just
Yeah. Yeah.
it's multitasking. I'm terrible at it. But
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
definitely wanted to include more people and their questions from the chat so that we have a chance to get to know you. And I'm really grateful that you took some time out of your day to, to have a convo with me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. So here's actually before I think we're going to like wrap up, but I want to ask you a question real quick.
Yeah, sure.
So, yeah. So we're both study streamers and we both happen to be, we both happen to be guys, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think some of the things that we can do to help address this problem that seems to be primarily on like the men's side when coming into interacting with study streamers, especially ones that, perceived as female and such? What do you think like some of the things we could say to the guys, some of the ways we can reach out to them, because I think
that's a great question.
Yeah. Because I think we personally, like,
Mhm.
because of the way that everything's structured, right, we have more of a say. The guys will listen to us more.
Sure.
Just unfortunately, like, it shouldn't be that way, but unfortunately it is, right?
Yeah.
So I was just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, no, I would agree with your statement. Is that I don't know. I think for me personally, to be honest, I haven't seen anything in my chats, but
Right.
I've seen it in other chats because I like I said, I do go to like Laura's chat. I like to hang out there. I like to hang out in your chat. There's another streamer named Just XN where I go to his chat. But it's mainly with the women,
Right.
There's a level of disrespect, straight up.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm reluctant, to be honest. I'm reluctant to just kind of say my piece there because I am a confrontational person, believe it or not, but not to
Gotcha.
the point where it's toxic, where it's mean spirited. It's
Yeah.
coming from an educational point of view, but I also want to respect the fact that there's mods, that there's people in the chat who are looking after the streamer, if you will.
Yeah.
And so I always try and stay back for a little bit just to see what transpires. I think there's only been once where I actually did say something, and it was like when I first started, like, hey, like lay off, don't disrespect. And I don't even remember if it could have been study vibes, I think at the time, because I only visited her channel once. But it was some derogatory, or it was a very mean spirited comment talking about her appearance and like how she should look, and it was belittling at the same time. I hate that. I hate that.
Yeah.
And I think I don't like it when people do that in general, but
Yeah.
I've noticed that it happens more towards women. So I think to maybe answer your question, when I see that, to speak up immediately versus, you know what, there's people involved. Maybe perhaps I'll let them handle it. I think if you're male and you have a good head on your shoulders, you would speak up right away, to be honest. And I think for me, I perhaps took the back seat because I was like, okay, well, I want to respect the people who are here. I perhaps don't know the full context of the what's happening. It could be a joke, whatever. But
Yeah, yeah,
if I notice something, I want to deliberately say like, "Hey, that's not okay. You can't. That's not acceptable." We should call people out when we see that, especially being male. We should be
yeah.
able to then tell other males, "Don't do that." Like that's disrespectful. And I think also the mindset I had was it could be a I don't want this to be an excuse of any sort, but it could be cultural as well. Like maybe perhaps there's a language barrier in which they don't even know or realize what they're saying.
Yeah.
Then I started to get involved more into chats, visiting other, streamers, and I was like, okay, I think people know exactly what they're saying. um,
Right.
I think they know very well what they're saying, and I think I'm pretty naive, to be honest, that they wouldn't know what they're saying. So, um, yeah, I think not just moving forward, but this is something that I've always wanted. Like, I hate it when someone's almost defenseless. Like that's a righteous anger, maybe, where I don't like it when people get targeted, especially women, and I get very upset about that. So, I always think to myself, like my sister, like I'm very protective of my sister, like super
Yeah.
protective, and I can't imagine. So, like, there's been maybe a few times where people have called her certain things where I mean, without any hesitation, like without missing a beat, I was very quick to interject and say like, okay, we're not going to go down that road. I'm a small guy, but I'm not going to back down from anything, um,
Yeah, yeah.
so so I would say using that same attitude to educate more males who are in the study stream, and then even outside of the study stream to educate more males, I would make an effort to speak up more often and to call it out.
Okay. I guess another question with that, because this is something I've thought about a lot, is like, how do we go about doing that? So when I like that kind of thought crosses my mind, because like we can do things like call out, right? And that will stop the immediate behavior. But there's an underlying like behavior that's driving it. And that's the thing I think about a lot. Like
Mm,
what exactly is like making this, what exactly is like setting up this behavior? What structures are like incentivizing this, right?
mhm,
Like I think now I'm going to take a guess here. I would probably could like categorize, I think, a lot of guys in probably two different categories. Those ones who are malicious, who do these things as a way of like, of attacking, right? Like those
right.
people are definitely there. And I think, but I think there's also another category of guys who will do these things for reasons that they don't consider like bad, right? They don't recognize sometimes what they're doing is bad.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because I've definitely been in that situation before. I am an idiot. Like I've seen some of the like the behavior that a lot of these guys have engaged in, and
Mhm,
I've done these things before, right?
mhm,
Just a flat out admit that, you
mhm,
know. So I've had to like learn a lot of these things, and I never really had like people to tell me exactly what an alternative to that was, right?
I see.
There were
Yeah.
people who told me what not to do, but no one told me what to do
Mm,
or what was good or why, right?
mhm,
So that's at the very least, I think I'm just trying when I'm moving forward, what I'm trying to do, or I'm trying to like think about doing is to address it in that way. Assume that this is the kind of like man that's doing the thing, right?
mhm,
And treat them in such a way, unless they're like explicitly malicious.
right.
Treat it to where it's like, hey, this is what you should not do. This is the reason why, and here's an alternative,
Right.
right?
So essentially providing a solution to what is the problem of, hey, this is not what you're supposed to do. Here is how you can fix it, but this is the main reason of why. But I think it all draws back to kindness, caring and
Yeah,
respecting another human being and recognizing that they are human beings, Uh
yeah.
being 100% kind, I think would go so far.
Oh
Um
yeah, definitely.
and I
Like,
I do have to I do have to say from a very different standpoint, or maybe the same, but um I noticed that there was a lot of students that I would work with who come from broken homes. And what I mean
yeah,
by broken homes is like mom and dad are not there. They're in the foster system, they're being adopted, and even in the adoption Some people have been abused and physically or emotionally or even sexually abused. There's so much brokenness into that they don't even know how to accept um, kindness, and they don't even know what it looks like. And for those people who are being malicious, or not malicious, but don't even realize it because maybe it's a cultural thing. They learned it from
Mhm.
their friends, the guys being guys or whatever. Um, I think it's just it simply draws back to a certain level of education. I think it's up to perhaps males like us to be able to call that out and say like, okay, this is the reason why you shouldn't do it, because
Yeah.
you wouldn't want this to be done to you,
Yeah,
right?
engaging a level of empathy there, right?
Yeah,
Because I mean, most people are empathetic to some degree. Like
right.
engaging that empathy is definitely an effective tool for like trying to get them to think about like, hey, how would you feel if this? There is one problem with this though, as a practical matter, because I've done this before.
Mm,
Because I interact with a lot of people who are like incels and red pill kind of people. If you're familiar with any of these kind of like terms, right?
mm. Uh,
All right.
the red pill, yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
yeah. If anyone's familiar with that kind of thing, like incels are people who think they are completely unlovable due to like physical characteristics, and there's a lot of like misogyny that comes along with that, right?
mm,
And the thing is like this gets really like deep in trying to like figure out this problem, but like there's in some cases what I've seen is that when you try to engage in that empathy, you hit a stumbling block because for a lot of men like receiving things like, for example, compliments is not something that a lot of men get, right?
mm,
So like when you're trying to engage in empathy of like being over, like when so like people on like streams and such are getting compliments constantly about their looks,
right.
it's like trying to talk to a person who's dying of thirst and trying to get them to empathize with a person who's drowning, right?
Mm,
There's like a disconnect of empathy there because they're in a situation where they have nothing.
right.
And this person's in a situation where they're like drowning in these things.
Hmm.
You see what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
So like when you're like
absolutely.
actually trying to like connect with someone,
Hmm.
I like to try to keep these things in mind, these very minutia details.
Right. But and I think that's why I would say though, um, like I'll speak on just maybe a little bit of my experience, but I grew up in a loving home, where I have both my parents.
Yeah.
I have my brother and sister, very supportive and loving. That's the environment I grew up in. I know what that's like. I know what that's like.
Right.
But the friend that I have, who comes to mind, who is the complete polar opposite. Somehow we came across each other's paths. We did not hit it off at first, but they came from a place where it was so broken that they didn't even know how to, like, another male was
Yeah.
taking like, wasn't, how do I put it, was having a hard time taking any sort of compliment, because they didn't even know like that was a compliment. They've never been complimented before, so they
Right.
assumed that it was something hurtful or mean or whatever or sarcastic,
Yeah.
and that led to one thing, after another, really. But then over time the communication was key, because we tried to figure out what we were talking about, I think. and
Right.
um and I think if we were to push the idea of, like, with all these males who are on live streams and stuff like that, especially in our community of Study With Me, I think the goal is to address it in a kind manner, as kind as possible, and say like,
Yeah.
this is unacceptable,
Right.
uh, s- because you wouldn't want this to be done to you. It's not fair to come to, especially like that's what kind of gets me a little amped up, is like, who dislikes a Study With Me stream? you know
Right.
People are just studying.
Yeah.
So I personally have a hard time with understanding why even that happens. But you get trolls and whatnot, and and I remember specifically, there were people on my live stream who gave me a dislike, and I just simply, I called it out, and I said, I'm really, and I was genuine about it, by the way. In, not that I'm ever not that way, but I said, I really hope the person who left a thumbs down is having a better day,
Yeah.
or feels like that somehow helps them feel better. But I really hope that you're okay.
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I would hate to think that something's going on, and if you ever want to talk about it, feel free to like say something in the comments, just so that I can acknowledge you, and just you know maybe you just need some sort of encouragement. No
yeah,
joke, the moment I said something and called it out, the thumbs down went away.
yeah.
It went away
I
because they were like, oh, okay, I wasn't expecting that.
right.
They were expecting something like, well, you can imagine what they were expecting, but yeah, I would call it out and say, like, I really hope, genuinely, I hope you have a better day. Maybe
Yeah,
you're just having a crappy day, and somehow, some way, that's happened on two separate occasions where the thumbs down would go away, the thumbs up
right.
would go up. So perhaps people are just having a bad day, and so but I would say you just call it out, and remind people, hey, you need to treat people with kindness.
Yeah,
That's really the key, I think, in my opinion, is to care for another human being. That's all you got to do, really.
yeah, definitely. Like I would agree with that. Like I've definitely seen situations to where like almost like love bombing someone is a better tactic, because sometimes people come in with like an expectation, like they're downvoting your stream or something like that, or they're
Right.
leaving a malicious comment, and their expectation is that you're going to be combative, right? Like that's just that's the pattern. But then when you're not, it kind of throws them for a loop. And sometimes I've even like had situations to where I've had people who were like really combative or really belligerent in my chat, and I just kind of like engage with them on like a more, just like, hey, how you doing today? And it's like, we don't have to do that right now. It's fine.
Yeah.
And then like they became like, regular viewers,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they were perfectly fine within the community.
Well, and I think I'm throwing it out there because perhaps it might be down to the word alone. In this last year, and it's not just this last year. This has been happening for a long time, of course, but in this last year, people have been feeling much more alone because of the what's been happening around us, and again, I would just say, like, for me, it's easy to approach a conversation like that and call it out. I think it's 10 times harder though for a female.
It is. All of these things right here, like I'm speaking about this from our position, right?
Mhm.
Like you and I can do these kind of things pretty easily. Like being combative is like kind of what we can do and get away with easily,
Mhm.
right? Like we can do that and people are going to respect us. I get a stern voice and people like shape up like that, right?
Mhm.
Like this does not work for the vast majority of like anyone who's like perceived as like female.
Mhm.
Right, they're going to be called like bitchy or something, or they're
Right.
perceived that way, and then they're going to like all these kind of things, right? This is like things that we can engage in.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
like I wish it weren't like that. It were, but yeah, that just seems to be the way it is right now.
And it's a bit odd, but now that we even talk about this, like I even saw Danya even said that the dislikes right now, there's 2.
Nice.
Oh, that's just money. Yeah, and
Yeah,
you know,
Laura said, by the way.
I just, yeah, exactly. I noticed what Laura just said. We get told we're hysterical and to calm down.
Right. It's just a joke.
It's interesting because I think that's yeah, exactly. You even talked about it just now, but theirs seemed irrational.
Yeah.
They're viewed as like, you don't, oh my gosh, we got a crazy woman, like all of a sudden going off, and but when it comes to guys, that's not the word that's thrown out there. It's just like, oh, okay. And they exit stage left or stage right.
Right.
Yeah, and it's like Savannah's saying, chill, woman, you're too sensitive. Like those
Right.
are
That's
words.
another.
Like, yeah, it's just a joke. Why are you so sensitive?
Right.
And perhaps that's where we can come in, and say,
Yeah.
like, like to ask you, Crash, what would you say in this case? Like when you see someone say, it's just a joke. It's just a
Right.
joke. You're too sensitive, or why are you too sensitive? what is something that you feel like you can say to that?
So I guess it'd be two things. It would depend sometimes on like what exactly like the behavior is, right? And like how far you can reach them. Because sometimes you just need to be like, all right, shut the fuck up, get out. Like that's sometimes you just have to do that, right? Because someone's being belligerent, maybe they need some time to cool down or whatever. But the main thing I would say with that is like, would you treat me the same way?
Yeah.
Would you take my concerns the same way? And the answer is probably going to be no, because they would immediately like probably listen to me, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, if you don't do that, if you're not going to consider their feelings as valid, but mine is valid, well, I think there's a problem there, right? Do you see that?
Yeah.
Like, do you see the difference of what you're doing there? And like, if that doesn't like get some gears turning and they're just like, yeah, I totally see that. Well, bye, sorry, you have to exit the community.
Right. Yeah. And I'm taking a deeper look actually at the chat. Because normally I'm always just kind of like just interacting here, but
Yeah.
The dislikes disappeared.
Oh yeah, and Laura with the whole smile thing too. Like that's another one. Like people basically like coming up to you and being like, "You need to behave this way." It's like, no, I'll behave how I want, right?
Yeah. Ever been told to smile makes my blood boil, is what Savannah says. All
It's a
day,
common
every
one.
day, same stuff, and those stuff are unfair, of course, and we get angry at some point. Oh, am I seeing someone in the background?
Oh yeah, it's my brother.
Oh, okay.
He just got home from work.
Gotcha. And Laura even says, I get the smile one so often.
Yeah.
Do you know what she means by that? The smile one? Like
Yeah,
you
yeah,
should smile.
Yeah, exactly. It's that one. If you ever worked in like a grocery store or anything, or anywhere like public sector, it's like, hey, you should smile more. You look more pretty like that. Like things like that.
Yeah, I can
It's
already
like,
hear.
Yeah.
I can already feel people in the chat like, ugh.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that one makes me so incredibly furious.
Oh, and by the way, I just want to mention, like, regarding like everything I said earlier, like, there's kind of two approaches I have to take to this kind of stuff, right? When it comes to like engaging and thinking about like how to solve these problems, I try to understand like as much as I can from the perspective of the person that I'm trying to go into. But from like a practical matter, when it comes to things like study streams, I consider these things a safe space. So I don't really engage in that kind of behavior on the streams like that, right? So if someone's engaging in like belligerent or sexist behavior, it's the normal like warning, timeout and then ban, right?
Yeah.
Like I just want to make sure that's clear that I'm not going to be like engaging in like, this very permissive kind of like attitude towards these things.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. Just more of like trying to think about it from a systemic point of view and solving it from like a bigger, kind of thought.
Right. Yeah, and and I've said this before, and I'm sorry that for those who are having to deal with these issues, I really am sorry that you have to, but
Yeah.
I think part of the solution is guys like us who can perhaps speak up about it and just call it out, but to do it, I think in a I always bring it up, but in a way of kindness, I think it really does change because people don't know what to do with that. You're constantly being attacked by someone, and then to turn around, not to be necessarily passive. That's not what I'm saying, actually. But what I'm saying is like, okay, that I think is coming from a place of anger or hurt, because I can see that clearly this person has issues. So let me address that and just say, like, I really hope you're feeling better throughout the day, maybe, or please don't refer to these people in a way that hurts their feelings or whatever. Just love them with kindness.
Yeah,
I
got you.
If it gets to the point where it's like, okay, they're clearly not, they're not even listening to you or engaging with what you're saying, like as a streamer, I'm like, okay, perhaps this is the time for them to just go, that's probably where I would go with it at that point.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, Crash, thank you for the question, by the way, because that was a good
problem.
question, and I was like, you know what, I don't know how I would respond other than to say, I've always tried to be kind to people, no matter who they are, what lifestyle they are. I've always tried to be kind to people because I want to be treated the same way, with respect and kindness. I think it's just something that we should strive to do as males in this, where we have a platform, especially,
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely. I agree that we have a certain level of responsibility that we have to take on as public figures, just in general, right? We are role models. And that's, at the end of the day, that's what we are. Or we, whether we like it or not.
Actually, I would agree 100%. Yeah. 100%. So guys, thank you so much for hanging out with us, talking with Crash here, asking him questions. And Crash, thank you for your time. I mean, this was something I was looking forward to. I had a lot of fun. It was a great conversation, and I mean, I hope to be able to have more of these, in the future with you if you're up for it.
Oh, absolutely.
Awesome. All right.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I want to thank you so much for being here, for hanging out with us. Remember, don't forget, Crashhermit is the name of the channel, Crashhermit, and you can go ahead and look into the description below. I have multiple links of Crash that you can check out. I am so excited to be able to have these conversations with other study streamers, and whether you're an educator, a student, a teacher, a parent, like I find myself learning a lot. So Crash, I sincerely want to thank you. It's been helpful to kind of see your perspective on things, and so I hope to see you real soon. And of course, and with everybody else, I hope to see you real soon. And remember, be kind and rewind. Have a good night. Hadouken!